All right, everyone, welcome back to Virginia and U.S. history. So, today we're going to be taking a look at the emergence of modern America, a lot of the factors that are going on. We're going to be talking about immigration, westward expansion, all of that good stuff. So, to go ahead and get us started, we are going to talk about a lot of the immigration things. So we are in the late 19th and early 20th century. So late 1800s, early 1900s, and a lot of economic opportunities in the industrializations, technological changes are happening in America. Immigration is going to be a huge fuel for this to happen because we have more people who are willing to work and help that change happen. So, following the Civil War, a lot of westward movement is going to happen. It's going to only intensify after the war. Before and during the war, there was a bit of people moving westward. You know, we had a couple 100,000 people move west before the Civil War. It's going to increase exponentially after the war. And that's people moving all over the place between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean. So, industrialization is going to help out. So we're going to see a lot of farming in the economy, and a lot of produced goods moving westward. Immigration, there's a lot of land available out in the West, so they're coming here. A number of people stay in the cities to work in factories, things like that, but others are going out west to try and strike it rich. And just people are migrating in general. People who are already living here, their families may have been here for 100 years already, and it's like, you know what, our family's not doing that well, let's try our luck out west. So they uproot and move on that way to see what they can do. We're also going to see after the Civil War that quintessential image that everyone thinks of when they think of the American West, the cowboy, the long cattle drives, hundreds of miles moving herds of cows and steers, to market so that they can be sold and be processed into food. The unfenced land, just the wide open prairies. This is the image that we get of the later 1800s, from like the 1860s to the 1900, really. Now, a lot of Americans, they want to rebuild their lives after the Civil War, and that is going to really lead people to take advantage of what is called the Homestead Act of 1862, which is going to give free public land out in the West to settlers who want to live and farm the land. So, you know, say you're from, shoot, you can say you're from, Prince Edward County, Virginia, and if your farm got destroyed over the course of the Civil War because of the fighting, you might want to take advantage of the Homestead Act and just declare to the government, "Hey, we're moving out there. What can you give us?" And they're like, "Oh well, here's 250 acres for you to farm." "Oh, thanks. We're on our way." All right. So, and in some cases, there would be contests for land. And I'm going to show a little clip here that actually is from a movie that deals with people immigrating to the United States from Ireland and making their way out west to lay claim to a couple hundred acres of land that they can, then make a living on. And this contest is basically a race, people on horseback, people pulling covered wagons, and they basically have flags that they need to find these markers to lay claim to a plot of land. And so this is just a recreation of one of those events happening from the late 1800s.
no wish to fight.
Lord protect us, Daniel! Here they come!
And you get ones like this that cheat.
Stand by, partner, and pretend you're out of breath.
Pretend? My heart's up here in my nose.
My God, Nora! Oh, this is thrilling! Nora! No, Nora! No!
All right. So, yeah. Occasionally, with stuff like this, there will be those who cheat, like these two who snuck out the night before and found a plot of land that they liked and basically laid in hiding until anybody was showing up. They'd be like, hey, we got here first. So, yeah, real nice. All right. Now, we had a lot of people who were moving westward. We're also seeing a lot of African Americans moving out west to seek new opportunities after the Civil War because, relations were not exactly great in the South. So a lot of people would look for better opportunities heading out west. So you would have, thousands, not only white settlers, but also African American settlers who were moving out that way to seek a better life for them and their families. Now, the new technologies that would help us out with doing this, of course, the railroads would be a big help with going westward. We're also going to see things like the mechanical reaper. This was a machine that, would be pulled behind a horse and it would, through the turning of gears, it would swing blades around that would chop down grains and other grasses that would be, used for, food, like wheat to turn into bread and all such as that. Now, with all these lands being opened up in the West for settlement, it's going to make farming a lot more prosperous, and it's going to turn a lot of the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountain area of the West, into farms, ranches, and towns. And before the West was opened up, it was unsettled. It was still wild, and home of the Native Americans. But now with all these settlers moving out there, we're going to see some tensions building up as well between these different types of people. But now we get to take a look at the actual immigration that's going on. So before 1871, we get the old immigrants. These are people who are coming mostly from Western and Northern Europe, meaning Germany, Great Britain, Ireland, Norway, and Sweden. But after 1871 until 1920, so for a good 50 years, we're getting what is called the new immigrants. These are people from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy, Greece, and Poland, and Russia, modern day Hungary, the Yugoslavian area, so like the Balkans. We're also going to see an influx of Chinese and Japanese immigrants coming in on the West Coast, like to California. That'll be very important when, like with the building of the railroads, like the Transcontinental Railroad, there were a lot of Chinese workers on that. Now, like the earlier immigrants, these new immigrants came seeking freedom and better opportunities for them and their families. That's pretty basic to say right there, right? We all want that. So why else would you move somewhere new if you weren't trying to find that for you and your family? These new immigrants would be highly valuable in contributing to the industrial growth of America during this period. Like I mentioned before, the Chinese workers on the Transcontinental Railroad, we're going to see a lot of immigrants working in the textile and steel mills, making clothing and steel. That's going to be in places in like New York. We're going to see Slavic and Italians and Polish people working in coal mines in the East, like in Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. A lot of the work that these immigrants would be doing was also very lowly paid because they were immigrants. And there was a lot of anti-immigrant feelings in America during this time as well. That's nothing new. So there would also be a lot of dangerous working conditions. There were no safety standards. It was just go in, get the coal, get out. And if you lost a hand because a rock fell on it and crushed it, oh well, I guess you're out of a job. That's pretty much how it was. So for new immigrants who were coming from Europe to America, they would have to go through Ellis Island, which is an island in New York Harbor. And one of the first sites that these people would see on their way to America would be the Statue of Liberty. And, that's after this long, treacherous voyage across the Atlantic. And, it's like, hey, we're here. We finally made it. And then they get to go through Ellis Island. So, little story to add with all of it. This ship right here, the Zealand, is actually the ship that my one great grandmother came to America on from Germany back in the 1920s. And she went through Ellis Island. She got processed there as a new immigrant. And she would have had to wait in lines like this, which would have been taking a very long time. They would take records of like who's coming in. So like your name, your age, where you're from, who you're traveling with. Do you have a job waiting for you here? Are you being sponsored by anybody who's going to like help you get a job? Someone's going to give you a place to live. You have to have all of these things basically prearranged before you even get here so you can enter the country. Now, one of the other things that would happen is when sometimes the people who are keeping the records, like the gentleman with the big mustache on the left, they might change your name when you get here. So one example is another set of great grandparents. The last name is Babjak. It's a Slavic name. It's like Babjak for the spelling. It was changed to Babyak, Babyak, because of spelling and pronunciation. The person who wrote it down got it wrong. But that's what the name became when it was Americanized. So that would happen to a lot. So, for example, say you have a Polish guy coming in with the last name Oleknowitz, and the guy's just like, I don't know how to spell that. Your new name is Mr. Smith, and that's how some of that would happen. So yeah, just a fun little factoid. If you go to Ellis Island today, there is a wall that's a memorial to immigrants who came through Ellis Island. And my grandfather and his sister actually paid to have their uncle and some other family members' names put on the wall. Their uncle is this guy here, Oscar Thurkelson, and Teresa Thurkelson. That is their one aunt. So it's pretty cool. Like, it was donated by Jean, that is my grandpa's sister, and Chris, that is my grandpa. So like, you can do stuff like this. Like, if you find out you have family that went through there and their name's not on the wall, you could get it put on there if you wanted. It's pretty cool. Now, with immigrants coming in, immigrants had to begin the process of assimilation, becoming American, because America was looked at as a melting pot. We're not broken up into these different ethnicities like over in Europe, where each country is its own thing. In America, we come together and we grow and take from each other. And it's like, hey, an example of this, Italian food. Everybody loves Italian food, right? It's not just Italians who are allowed to eat it. I'm not Italian, but I like to go to Olive Garden. I like to go to pizzerias. I like to get myself some Italian food. So yeah, the melting pot, everything coming together for everyone to enjoy. But immigrants would often settle in ethnic neighborhoods, and that's how we get things like Chinatown in Philadelphia, in Los Angeles, in New York. There were like German neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods. My one grandpa, he used to be a cop up in New Jersey, and he used to patrol an area called Jewtown because that's where all the Jews lived. So that's a thing that would happen. Now, these immigrants, their children would, go to school. They would learn English, and they would learn from their their kids how to speak English better, and also just out on the streets interacting with people. So they would learn and adopt a lot of American customs, as well as kind of giving their own little flair to it from their native homeland, and working on becoming full citizens. So yeah, it's a lot of interesting things when you take a look at the history of immigration in our country. Now, despite the valuable contributions that the immigrants brought, they would often face a lot of hostility from the natives. From just the regular Americans, people whose families had been here for 100 years or so. There's a lot of fear and resentment. They're taking our jobs. So there'd be a lot of prejudice based on religion and cultural differences, as well as like, hey, they're all coming in here taking our jobs from hardworking Americans, all these foreigners, all that stuff. That's not a new argument against immigration. That's been around since, at least 150 years. That argument has been around. It's probably never going to fully go away, but yeah, you never know. Maybe it will one day. Now, it got to some extremes at some points. So with this nativism movement, because we're going to see things like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which essentially made it very, very strict on how many Chinese people were allowed to come into the country each year. There would be just the regular Immigration Act of 1921, which would greatly limit people coming from a bunch of different countries like Germany, Italy, from Japan, from Russia. A lot of stuff like that was happening. And it would greatly affect the numbers of people who were coming here during, a lot of these years. Now, let's talk about urbanization a little bit. So the growth of cities, that's urbanization. Now, a lot of cities such as Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, Pittsburgh, New York, they grew very, very quickly because of the manufacturing and transportation centers that they are. A lot of factories in there would require all of this labor, so of course the people are going to move to them. But the people who are moving there and their families would live under really harsh conditions, and they would be crowded into very small living quarters. Like you might have a family of 6 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment type of deal. So that's how you get a lot of these slums and ghettos type of neighborhoods. So like here's an example right here. It's a 1-room apartment, and you've got like 6 people living in it. The rapid growth of these cities would cause housing shortages and also a need for new public services, such as sewage and water systems and public transportation. This is when New York is actually going to begin construction of the world's first subway system right in around the year 1900. And a lot of cities are also going to build trolley and streetcar lines. Think San Francisco. You got those almost like train looking things on the streets that are being pulled by cables. That's a trolley or a streetcar. So a lot of cities would actually have those. Sometimes the cables are moving above the ground, like pulling the cars from the top. Sometimes they're in a track in the ground and they're pulling it, going through a track in the ground. It's pretty cool actually when you look at how those things work. All right, this will be our final slide for today. And we're talking about the admission of some new states. And as the population, whether it is just Americans moving westward or immigrants moving westward, we're going to see the population greatly shifting. And we're going to see a lot of states in the Great Plains, which is basically all of this central area right here, that are going to be added into the country. So it's like Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana. We're seeing all of those types of places start to get statehood. And by the early 1900s, basically all the states that you see pictured in this map, the lower 48, are all states officially now, from Atlantic to Pacific. They're all fully admitted, full-blown statehood. So now that is where we're going to leave off for today. Be sure to come back next time where we will be continuing with the growth of America into the modern age.